I want to kind of start out with a couple of questions. And when it comes to PRRS, it's the two basic questions. The first one is, why do negative farms go positive? The second one is, why do positive farms break again and again? And just to illustrate a little bit of why the question about why do negative farms go positive, some of you may have seen a chart like this, but what this is a survival curve. And this is the number of weeks after a farm was established negative. And this happens to be data for 39 farms in a pilot study that was done with some southern Minnesota, northern Iowa sow farms. But basically over time, these farms went positive, a fairly high percent of them. And so that's a key question for us when it comes to PRRS, is why does that happen? The second question, why do positive farms break again and again? This is some data from about 8 sow farms. It's standardized aborts per 1,000 inventory females per week. And this is just illustrating the kind of cycles of PRRS breaks in these sow farms on basically an annual basis for a number of the farms in this particular set. So why do positive farms break again and again? And both of those have a question in common. And the common question is this: where do the other PRRS viruses that already exist that you don't currently have, whether you're naive or you have something already, but where are those viruses that you don't currently have and that you also don't want, where do they come from? Okay, well, to just kind of do a quick illustration of that, let's go to Google Earth, a useful tool, and we'll look at our farm here. This is Golden Rule Farms. And Golden Rule Farms has neighbors. Okay, and as it happens, Golden Rule Farm is infected with PRRS. And as a result of being infected with PRRS, Golden Rule Farms' neighbors are at risk. Because PRRS is, as Scott D. has shown in some of his research, PRRS has a way of finding the neighbors of the farms that are infected. Okay, well, at some time in the past, maybe Golden Rule Farms didn't have PRRS, but Golden Rule's neighbors had PRRS, and it spread to other neighbors, and eventually spread to Golden Rule Farms and Golden Rule Farms' neighbors. Okay, that also applies to the country. Okay, we've got a lot of hog-dense areas in the country. There's virus within those areas and that moves between those areas, and there's transmission of virus from site to site, whether it's by aerosol or by network connections. But we see that virus moves around the country, as well as from neighbor to neighbor. Okay, now this is the uncommon question. We had the in-common question. This is the uncommon question. Where do the new different viruses come from? Where do the 142s originate? Where do the 184s, the 118.2s, now the 126.2s, I think, is the current one? Where do those come from? The ones that we would call different or new virus variants that don't yet exist. Okay, well, to speculate a little bit on that, we'll play the PRRS behavior game. Now let's look at growing pigs. If you look at where possibly new viruses could come from, might come from growing pigs, might come from breeding herds, but let's look at growing pigs as an example. Okay, this happens to be a dendrogram of about 400 sequences from a system over about a 2-year period. And in that system, you can see the main branches as they branch off here, and we categorize them into 3 types. Wild type 1, which was present in the system at the beginning of the sampling. Wild type 2 then emerged, and then wild type 3 emerged, and then we had some of these other ones out here we'll call oddballs. Wild type 99, that's the designation for oddballs. And all of these sequence clusters excuse me, were from each other, were about 3 to 4% different from each other. And so they fit the system, but they're distinct enough from each other that we classified them as different types. Now, what you're looking at here is a scale of time, and this is about a 2-year period. It's just in order of the number of sequences, but from here to here is about 2 years. Now on this scale, this is the percent difference in the virus sequence relative to the first time that particular virus was observed in the system. So the green is wild type 1, the orange is wild type 2, and this purple one is wild type 3. 3 distinct kind of virus clusters within that system. And you follow the green, and the green shows some change relative to where it started, but then it kind of tends to disappear over time. And then this orange one comes in, and this one first was observed in some naive gilts. But this actually was a virus that, before we started measuring in the system, had been seen a year or so earlier. So it wasn't new to the system. It's just that in the span that we were sampling, this is the first time we observed it. And then it kind of floated along, and then it started to change and kind of took off throughout the system. And then this kind of purple one here, that is a virus that had not previously been seen in the system, and that was first found in a finisher. And it kind of stuck, and it spread. Okay, now I want to tell you the connection between this virus and these up here. These also first showed up in growing pigs. But, and not, these 10 aren't all the same, but I just lump them together as kind of the oddballs. But these 10 showed up in the growing pigs in the system, as did this one. But of these 11, this was the one that stuck and spread. Okay, so not all new variants are bad. Not all new variants are strong enough to survive, but some are. And those that are will persist and spread. Now, new variants can come from growing pig populations, and my opinion, and this is an opinion because I don't know of any research, epidemiologic or otherwise, that has demonstrated this, but my opinion is that the vast majority of new variants, not things that are already out there, but things that aren't there yet, but that we'll see in years as they pass by, the vast majority of those come from growing pig populations. That's my speculation. But I also think that some could be started on the path of new variants, or maybe even emerge as new variants from Farrowing, and I'll show you why I think that. Okay, you're looking at 2 different farms. Each of these are 5,000 cell farms, and the lines here are the percent of individual piglet PCR positives. Okay, and these were naive farms when they started. The first time virus was detected, these farms are relatively close together, and so they were detected positive at about the same time. And you can see the individual piglet PCRs decline over time with the actions that were taken in the farm. But all of you guys that manage cell farms or work with others who manage cell farms know that when you get to somewhere in this neighborhood, the pigs start looking pretty good. And if you started with eliminating cross-fostering or instituting our McRebel approach to try and minimize circulation among farrowing rooms, when you get to about here, you start thinking, dang, I can save another pig or pig and a half per litter if I start cross-fostering again. And that's what happened on these 2 farms for about a month. But I can remember the conversations is, all right, let's start some limited cross-fostering, but if we see that percent start to go up again, we got to stop. Okay, because we don't want to compromise the long-term goal of getting virus out of the sow farms for the sake of a short-term gain on a small number of pigs. Okay, and in fact, what we saw after cross-fostering started is in both farms we saw the percent PCR positive start to increase. Okay, now on this farm, I want to speak to this farm first. The next time we got our samples and saw the uptick in PCR positives, said, all right, we got to stop because I don't want this to take off again. And they did, and it went to 0 and it stayed at 0. Now on this farm, the lesson is that even though the pigs look good, which they do, just that one decision cost 4 months of negative pigs. Just that one decision. Okay, and so it took 4 months longer to get to a negative pig flow because of that one decision on this farm by going back to cross-fostering for a little over a turn. Now, I want to speak to this farm, because this farm, it was the same type of dynamic. Cross-fostering started, the PCR started to go up, cross-fostering stopped, but they came down again. But what's interesting about that farm is there was a week of testing, and in some of these periods we started testing every week. There was a week of testing that showed, after it went back to zero, it showed an uptick again. And so something happened with the pigs in that room while they were being born and lactated, that it took off. And what's interesting is how these particular farms are structured. The Farrowing barn is one long hallway. Cool cells pull air across the hallway into the rooms through the little baffles as the fans kick on in the Farrowing rooms. And the rooms on the end of the hallway where the pigs are loaded out twice a week, pigs that they let them all out into the hallway and they kind of pile up on that end of the hallway. Well, this may not happen every time, but it happened this time. That the rooms on the end of the hallway are the ones that showed an uptick in the PCR positives. And so when we saw that, we said, well, we need to purge those rooms, and so they ended up selling pigs a little younger than they normally would, and then tried to keep those rooms down for a few days longer and go through at least one more cycle of wash and disinfection. But what's interesting is even with that additional effort, 3 weeks later in the same rooms, we saw a positive or two in the pigs from those same rooms on the next turn, and kept up the wash and disinfection pressure and the restrictions of going in and out of those rooms, and changed how the pigs piled up in the hallway and the procedures for disinfecting the hallway. But even on top of that, then the third time around, saw another positive in that same room, okay, or in those same rooms, I should say. Okay, so you can wash and disinfect and do a really good job of it, but if there's one thing I know about pigs, is pigs are really good at finding virus. Okay, even after you've done a really excellent job of washing and disinfecting. Pigs are like magnets, and viruses like iron filings. If the pigs get anywhere close to virus, the virus will find them. Okay, but at the end of the day, you don't give up. You just keep the pressure on, and eventually this farm went negative as well. Now, but here's the point that I wanted to make about new variant emergence. On farm Y, from the first time we found the virus to the last time we found the virus in that farm, the variation, the maximum variation across all the sequences was about 1.5%. But interestingly enough, in the farm at the top, the other farm, Farm X, over the period of roughly a year from when the virus was first found to when the last virus was detected in that farm, it was almost 3% different in a year. Okay, which is a lot faster than I would have expected. Okay, so PRRS is very messy. Dan, I want to thank you for having your kids pose for this picture. PRRS is a messy disease, and PRRS is also an expensive disease. So, what do? Do you just give up? Well, I don't think we do. I think what we do is we think about the golden rule of PRRS control approach, and to me, when it applied to PRRS, the golden rule of PRRS approach is collaborating the support, implementation, and execution of a coordinated area regional PRRS control approach. So what's the basis? Well, you know the golden rule, do unto your neighbor as you would have your neighbor do unto you. And applied to PRRS, the golden rule, transmit unto your neighbor as you would have your neighbor transmit unto you. You can do a lot of stuff with your sites, your flows, your networks to control PRRS, but you're at risk of giving to your neighbor what you have, and your neighbor is at risk of giving to you what your neighbor has. Nobody wants to get virus from their neighbor. Nobody wants to give virus to their neighbor. But if you don't currently have virus active in a farm, or a farm's naive, and you have neighbors, you're at risk of getting it from them. If you have virus, you're at risk of spreading it to other neighbors. Just some background and a little overview. When it comes to area, regional, or system type control, three premises. The first one is that we've got to have a complementary coordinated approach, and there are no silver bullets, there are no magic weapons when it comes to PRRS. There's a toolbox and there's an arsenal that we use. So we're not going to shoot the silver bullet, but we do have an arsenal that we can bring to bear. But you've got to apply it, the whole thing, and it's going to target reduction of circulation within and amongst sites, flows, and networks across the areas. And all of that is essential if we're going to have effective, and effective doesn't mean just what you do, it's what you all do, effective management of PRRS. Second premise, if it's going to be effective, we've got to be a lot better than we are today with how we communicate, cooperate, coordinate, and collaborate amongst all the groups and players in the industry if we're going to be successful at PRRS. We're not each other's enemy. PRRS is our enemy in this battle. Third premise, you can't judge area regional control with experimental research. Okay, you can look at facets of things that are relevant to area regional control with experimental research, as a number of researchers have done. But if you're going to judge the success or failure of area regional control, it has to be done in a field setting. It has to involve production systems in areas. If we're going to build a body of evidence, track a record of success, and have proof of concept of area regional control as it applies to PRRS. Okay, any system, any flow, any site, any area, the goals are roughly the same. Okay, but for goals, pig performance obviously is king. That's the direct effect, and we all know what the key drivers of that are. Breeding herds, reducing clinical episodes, both the frequency and the duration and magnitude, that's the direct drivers. But with both growing pigs and breeding herds, if area regional control is to be effective, for the additional goals for growing pigs and breeding herds are really the same. Reduce virus, wild-type virus load, reduce genetic diversity of the viruses in the area region, and reduce the risk of new variant emergence. Okay, and those are indirect effects. When you sell the pigs, you're not going to get paid for this in the short term. The value of this is more of an investment that's paid off in the long term. And to do that, you obviously have to have a plan, but when you talk about an area regional basis, it's not a site plan, it's not a flow plan, it's not a system plan. It's a coordinated and well-executed plan for the whole region, for the whole area. Okay, just like you would apply a 5-step process to a site or a flow, you can apply it to the area. What is the goal for the region or the area? Where are you today across the area? What's holding you back? What are your main constraints? What are your risks that are holding you back? And what are you going to do about it in terms of solutions? And again, the importance of the coordination of a solution to an area is going to drive whether this succeeds or fails. And then you've got to obviously execute it in a consistent as well as persistent fashion. Now, we can talk about PRRS eradication, but if you're going to go through eradication or elimination, you have to go through control. Okay, we're not going to be successful in the long term to eliminate PRRS until we first control it and stabilize for it. So that is the starting point for any areas or regions that have positive sites. You also need weapons, and not just weapons. But you need people, everybody involved is important to the effort to commit to using all the weapons that are available correctly. So what's the arsenal? Best practices in terms of management, for example, Farrowing house management, assessing risk and then taking action on the risks that emerge in the area of biosecurity, and then circulation risks, for example, ones that have to do with flow and sanitation within and among sites. Exposure management at both an operational level, that's the geography, an operational level that is independent of geography to some degree with how we have sites and flows and networks that create connections between different geographies. But then also at a geography or proximity level, that's your neighborhood, your area, and your region. And then the arsenal of immune management, that's what is your target population, the appropriate timing, and then the tools to bring to bear. And that has to do with two main categories, replacements in breeding herds and growing pigs, of course. And then a key part of it is measurement to see, assess progress. And there's a lot of different aspects to that. Risk assessment is a weapon. And just one example of how that weapon's been applied, this is an external risk score over a 4-year period for a system of about 12 sow farms. And they didn't just do the risk assessments and then put them on a shelf. They did the risk assessments and then took action on the higher risks that they observed. Okay, now this black line is the number of PRRS breaks per farm every 2 years. And they were having about a break and a half in a 2-year period when they started. But they took action, and what they saw is on their highest risks and just kept putting pressure on those highest risks over time, and they saw that 2-year break rate decrease substantially. It didn't eliminate it, but it reduced it, and this was a financially beneficial activity using risk assessment as a tool. Now, there's a broader application to risk assessment. You can apply it at a site or at a regional or potentially even national level to define not the risk of just sites or a set of sites, but of entire geographies. Okay, and there's some projects where risk assessment is being used just that way in Sonora, Mexico, as one recent example that is an ongoing effort. Standards of practice can help identify what are the things that are associated with lower break rates, the consequences of risk, and help identify specific factors that need to be addressed, managed, or eliminated before starting a eradication effort or even a control effort, for that matter, in a area or region. Immunization is a weapon. This is one experimental study that was done, and this is a PCR percent positive at 7 and 14 days post-challenge. This is the log titer of the positives at 7 and 14 days post-challenge. And here the point is that the non-vaccinated pigs, this was the percent positives at 7 and 14 days post-challenge. The vaccinated pigs, this was the percent positive decrease. And of those that were positive at these times, this was the log titers and the difference between the two. Point there is there are things that you can do that reduce virus load of field virus that could be scaled to areas and regions. Monitoring of growing pigs. One of the things that we've looked at in the past and measured is the shift in field virus population over time. Each of these periods is about a 7-month turn of a pig pipeline. This percent up here is, these are vaccinated pigs. This is the percent of vaccine sequences. These are the field virus sequences over time. And we see a reduction in the total field virus sequences detected. We see a reduction in particularly this field virus over time. And these are what I call the oddballs, the ones that show up and disappear. This is the one that showed up in a finisher and then persisted. But these seem to go away over those full turns of the pig pipeline. Breaking it down by stage, nursery, wean to finish, finish. This is nursery. Okay, and as you might expect, there's not a lot of field virus there, but there is some, and so the effect on the percent change in field virus in nursery was slight. A greater effect over time in the finishing pigs, and a much greater effect over time in the wean to finish pigs. Okay, growing pig performance. This is the same system on an X-bar chart. Each one of these data points is 8 weeks of closeouts, and this is percent marketed over time. This is when the impacted pigs started being closed out, and this is the difference in terms of performance with percent marketed. This is nursery average daily gain. And here's the point I want to emphasize here is this is applying the entire arsenal. It's not applying any one tool by itself. There was 5 main things that were done in this system that affected this change, one of which was a bubble depot. And as you may know if you've done it or seen the literature, when you do bubble depops of nurseries, the first pigs that go back into those nurseries do pretty well. And then this system settled in at this level above prior experience in terms of nursery average daily gain. So that's another weapon that can be brought to bear. Finisher average daily gain shift, seen here. Okay, breeding herd monitoring. One of the keys of judging how well breeding herd control and intervention is going is measuring time to negative. This is 10 particular farms, and this is measuring time to negative pigs over time, and 2 farms here, 1 here, 2, 1, and 3, and then 1 out here. On average, the time to negative in these farms was about 21 weeks, minimum 13, maximum 43, but about the 90% or 9 out of 10 farms had negative pig flows within 25 weeks, 50% within 19 weeks. So that's a useful measurement criteria, I think, for judging how well an approach is working. Okay. How many of you guys have read Good to Great or are familiar with the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great? If those of you who have, you'll recognize this name, if not this picture. This is James Stockdale, and he was referenced in Good to Great because of what they referred to as the Stockdale paradox, made up of 2 statements. Confront the brutal facts, but never give up. Okay, PRRS is a brutal virus. Okay, it's probably the hardest virus we've faced in pigs. Influenza is a challenge for a different reason, but PRRS is probably the most brutal virus we've faced in pigs. But in spite of that, you don't give up. You keep going. You figure out how to deal with it. You figure out what you got to change to make it better, and you don't give up. Now, part of not giving up, in my opinion, is wrapped up in this statement. If it's really the case that PRRS costs us $560 to $700 million a year in this country, maybe it's worth actively working together and using all the weapons we have at our disposal to manage it, but not just manage it on sites and flows for ourselves, but in a coordinated, collaborative way, ourselves and all our neighbors.